You hear the hive before you see it. The sound is thick, close, and angry, vibrating through a hollow tree far above the ground. Your hands are already scraped from climbing. Smoke is stinging your eyes. And one bad foothold could send you into the rocks below. You can climb higher toward thousands of defensive bees. Or go back to camp with nothing. Why would an ancient human risk broken bones, blinding stings, and death for something as small as a mouthful of honey? The answer is stranger than simple hunger. Honey was not merely a sweet reward. In the right season, it could be a concentrated rescue package of calories, information, cooperation, and survival. That changes the choice in the tree. A handful of ripe fruit contains water, fiber, and useful nutrients, but it also takes space and time to gather. Honey is different. It is dense with sugars that the body can use quickly. A kilogram can contain more than 3,000 calories, although no hunter would calmly weigh it beneath a swarm. For a mobile group living without fields, stores, or livestock, that density mattered. Energy had to be found in a landscape that rarely placed it in convenient containers. Meat could be valuable, but hunts failed. Tubers could be dependable, but digging cost effort. Fruit came and went with the season. A large hive might hold an extraordinary amount of food in one hidden place. The problem was getting inside. Bees did not build their stores for humans. They defended them with numbers, venom, and nests placed in cavities that were difficult to reach. The richest hive might be high in a tree, deep in a trunk, inside a rock crack, or beyond a cliff ledge. That meant the first decision was not whether honey tasted good. It was whether the possible return justified the danger. One prehistoric image captures that calculation with almost uncomfortable clarity. At Cuevas de la Arana, the spider caves of eastern Spain, rock art shows a person reaching into a bee nest while surrounded by flying insects. The figure appears to climb with long flexible lines, often interpreted as ropes or a ladder, while carrying a container. The exact age of Levantine rock art remains debated, so the scene should not be treated like a dated photograph. It is still powerful evidence that prehistoric people considered honey gathering important enough to paint. The artist did not show a safe snack. The artist showed exposure, height, tools, and a human body suspended beside a swarm. That scene raises the next question. How did anyone make such a dangerous trip repeatable? Bravery alone would not be enough. A reckless climber might succeed once. A skilled honey hunter needed to judge the nest, prepare the route, control the bees, and come home alive. The work began before the climb. Tracks, insect flight paths, bird calls, tree hollows, and seasonal flowering could all narrow the search. A hunter who noticed bees flying in a steady direction near water might follow them. Another person might remember a tree that held a colony the previous year. Knowledge turned a huge landscape into a smaller map of possibilities. Then came inspection. Was the cavity active? Was the comb full enough to justify the effort? Could the tree support climbing stakes? Was there dry material for a torch? Was the wind likely to blow smoke toward the bees or back into the hunter's face? Every answer changed the risk. Modern observations of foraging peoples cannot be copied directly onto the distant past. They can, however, reveal what this kind of decision demands from a human body and mind. In 2014, anthropologist Frank Marlowe and his colleagues described honey collecting among the Hadza of northern Tanzania. Hadza men and women ranked honey as a favorite food, and the group collected honey from 7 kinds of bees. Women often obtained honey closer to the ground, including from stingless bees. Men frequently pursued larger stores made by stinging bees high in baobab trees. Some nests could be around 15 meters above the ground. That is roughly the height of a 4 or 5-story building. The climber did not have a steel ladder, a helmet, or a rescue crew. He could cut wooden pegs, hammer them into the baobab, and use them as steps. If the hive looked worthwhile, he might climb down, make a fire, prepare a smoking torch, and climb again. The sequence matters. The honey was valuable, but the method was what made the value reachable. Smoke helped reduce the bees' attack and gave the collector a narrow window to reach the comb. An axe opened wood that teeth and fingers could not. Climbing stakes transformed a vertical trunk into a path. Several separate technologies had to work together. This is the first major payoff of the mystery. Ancient humans did not risk their lives because they lacked caution. They took the risk because tools, fire, memory, and teamwork could convert a deadly gamble into a managed one. If you enjoy evidence-based stories that reveal the hidden logic of human survival, A like and subscription will help you keep following these mysteries. Managed did not mean safe. A broken peg could still fail. A gust could turn the smoke. A disturbed colony could pour from the cavity before the hunter was ready. Hands needed to grip while insects struck the face and arms. Pain could trigger panic, and panic was dangerous at height. The hardest choice might come after the comb appeared. Do you keep reaching for more, or descend with what you already have? Greed is an easy modern explanation. The deeper answer is uncertainty. No one knew when the next successful hunt would come. Rain could erase tracks. Game could move. A child could become sick. A nursing mother needed energy. A poor season could turn one large hive into a buffer for many people. The comb also offered more than liquid honey. It could contain wax, pollen, and bee brood, meaning larvae and pupae developing inside the cells. Those foods supplied different nutrients, and nothing required the neat separation seen in a modern jar. A honey raid could be messy, smoky, and full of crushed comb. It could also deliver a rare flood of energy to camp. That created a social decision. The climber took the greatest immediate danger, but the food often mattered beyond one person. Carrying comb back allowed children, elders, and others who had not climbed to benefit. Sharing also spread the consequences of success across the group. The risk belonged to one body for a moment. The reward could strengthen many bodies afterward. This may help explain why honey hunting became a learned tradition rather than a series of isolated accidents. Young people could watch how experts chose trees. They could learn which bees stung, which nested low, and which produced larger stores. They could practice knots, pegs, smoke, and timing before attempting the worst climb. Skill reduced danger, but culture preserved skill. Then the landscape offered an even more surprising partner. In parts of Africa, greater honeyguide birds lead human hunters toward wild bee nests. The bird can locate nests but cannot easily open them. Humans can use smoke and tools to break into the cavity. After the people take honey, the bird can feed on exposed wax and other remains. This is not a trained pet obeying an owner. It is cooperation between people and free-living wild birds. Claire Spottiswoode and her colleagues tested this relationship with Yao honey hunters in Mozambique's Nyassa National Reserve. The hunters used a distinctive call, a loud trill followed by a short grunt often written as burhum. In controlled field experiments, honeyguides responded more strongly to that specialized call than to unrelated human words or other bird sounds. The call increased the chance of being guided and of finding a bee nest. Why does that matter to the ancient mystery? Finding a hive may have consumed more time than opening it. A bird that reduced search time changed the energy equation before the climb even began. Human knowledge did not stop at tools. It could include communication with another species. No one can prove that every ancient honey hunter used honeyguides. The deeper principle is still clear. Survival often depended on reading signals that other animals ignored or produced for their own reasons. A chatter in the trees could become a direction. A changing call could mean the nest was near. A bird's behavior could turn an invisible food store into a reachable target. The human advantage was not strength alone. It was the ability to connect clues, share meanings, and coordinate action. Honey also left traces after people began using pottery. A team led by Melanie Roffet-Salque analyzed chemical residues preserved in Neolithic vessels from Europe, the Near East, and North Africa. They identified the molecular fingerprint of beeswax in pottery dating back to at least the 7th millennium BC. Beeswax survives chemically better than honey, so the residue does not reveal exactly what every vessel contained or how it was used. It does show that bee products were exploited widely as farming communities expanded. That finding adds a twist. Agriculture did not make the human relationship with bees suddenly begin. Instead, new containers captured evidence of a much older attraction that is harder to detect archaeologically. Honey itself disappears. Wax can linger. Rock art can show a dangerous act. Ethnography can reveal the decisions and skills behind a similar act. Together, these sources do not produce one perfect story of all ancient humans. They produce a strong pattern. Where honey existed, people often valued it enough to solve difficult access problems. The risk was real because the return could be unusually concentrated. The danger also selected for planning. A person had to delay the reward long enough to gather fuel, prepare smoke, make tools, and judge the climb. That is the opposite of blindly chasing sweetness. The most successful hunter was probably not the one who wanted honey most. It was the one who knew when the hive was not worth it. Some trees were too unstable. Some nests were too small. Some weather made smoke unreliable. Some injuries would endanger the whole group if another adult had to carry the victim home. Walking away could be expertise. Returning later could be strategy. Choosing a lower hive could be wisdom rather than fear. That is the counterintuitive center of the story. The willingness to take a deadly risk and the discipline to refuse it came from the same survival intelligence. Both required estimating a future that could not be seen. What happens if the hunt fails? What happens if the group misses those calories? What happens if the best climber is injured for weeks? There was no perfect calculation. There was only experience, attention, and judgment under pressure. You still recognize that mental struggle. Modern life offers sugar without cliffs, smoke, or swarms. A spoonful of honey now feels ordinary because thousands of dangerous decisions have been removed from the moment of eating. The tree has become a shelf. The hive has become a jar. The fall has disappeared behind a label. Yet the older pattern remains in other choices. You still trade present risk for future security. You still depend on skills learned from people who attempted the task before you. You still survive by deciding not only what is valuable, but what price is too high. The next human mystery begins there. Because the same ancestors who climbed for honey also had to decide when to face predators, cross rivers, and enter darkness for resources they could not get safely. The hive you heard at the beginning was never just the sound of danger. It was the sound of a decision your ancestors learned to survive.